Listen closely, my friends. There is a moment, and you have lived it, where the entire situation turned against you. Not slowly, not with warning, just turned. A conversation that went sideways. A room that shifted the second you walked in. A decision made above you, about you, that you were never asked about. And you stood there, watching things move in a direction you could not stop, reacting, scrambling, saying things you should have held back, going silent when you should have spoken, and later, alone, replaying the entire thing, asking yourself the same question that haunts every thinking person who has ever lost control of something that mattered. Why couldn't I hold that? Not why did I lose the argument, not why did the wrong person win, but why, with everything I knew, everything I felt, everything I was, why did the situation take me instead of me taking the situation? Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man alive. He commanded the Roman Empire. He had armies, wealth, authority that no person alive could challenge, and yet he wrote, privately in a journal never meant to be published, that the only real battlefield was inside himself. That the Danube campaigns, the Senate politics, the barbarian invasions, none of that was the real war. The real war was what happened between stimulus and response, between what hit him and what he chose to do next. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Not control over others, not control over outcomes, control over himself, and through that, an almost supernatural ability to move through every situation without being consumed by it. This is what the Stoics discovered. What they tested in courts and exile and war and grief and plague. Not a philosophy of detachment, not a philosophy of cold indifference, a philosophy of grip, internal grip. The kind that lets you walk into any room, face any pressure, absorb any blow, and stay standing, stay clear, stay dangerous in the most important way a person can be dangerous, fully in command of themselves. In this video, you will learn 7 lessons from the Stoic tradition, from Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, Cato, and others, that will permanently change how you handle every situation life puts in front of you. Not theory, not ancient quotes stripped of their context. Real psychological architecture built by people who were tested at the highest levels and survived. And before we begin, I want you to understand one thing. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control what is outside them. Other people's behavior, the outcome of conversations, how others perceive them, the economy, the politics, the circumstances. They exhaust themselves trying to grip something that was never meant to be gripped. The Stoics called this the fundamental error, the root of all anxiety, the source of all weakness, because the moment you chase what is outside you, you surrender what is inside you, and when you surrender what is inside you, you lose the only thing that ever actually gave you power. Let's begin. Lesson 1. The dichotomy that changes everything. What is yours and what is not. Epictetus was born a slave. Not metaphorically, not philosophically, literally owned. His master, a man named Epaphroditus, once twisted Epictetus's leg as a demonstration of power. Epictetus looked at him calmly and said, "You are going to break it." The leg broke. Epictetus looked at him again and said, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" No rage, no screaming, no begging, just clarity. That moment is the entire Stoic philosophy compressed into one exchange. Epaphroditus had power over the leg. He had zero power over Epictetus. And Epictetus knew, with absolute certainty, which one mattered. He later built his entire teaching around what he called the dichotomy of control. And it is, without exaggeration, the most operationally useful idea in the history of human psychology. There are things in your control, your judgments, your intentions, your responses, your attention, your values, the effort you apply, the meaning you assign. There are things not in your control, other people's opinions, the economy, your reputation, the outcome of events, whether someone likes you, whether the plan works, what other people decide to do. Most people live their lives in a continuous, exhausting war with the second category. They pour energy into controlling what others think. They twist themselves trying to manage perceptions. They lose sleep over outcomes they cannot determine. They feel genuine suffering, physical, psychological suffering, over things that were never theirs to hold. And the moment something from that second category turns against them, a relationship ending, a plan failing, someone choosing against them, they collapse. Because their stability was built on ground they never owned. The Stoics built their stability somewhere else. Cato of Utica, arguably the most politically principled man in Roman history, watched Julius Caesar dismantle the republic he had spent his life protecting. Everything he had built, every alliance, every stand he had taken, collapsed. Caesar won. The republic fell. And Cato's response was not despair. It was not surrender. He spent his last evening reading Plato's Phaedo, a dialogue about the immortality of the soul, and then acted with absolute dignity, because the only thing Caesar never took from him was his own mind. Here is how this applies to you, right now, in your actual life. Think of the situation that is draining you most, the thing that has your attention, your energy, your quiet anxiety at 2 a.m. Now ask the honest question, how much of what exhausts you about that situation is the part you cannot control? The answer, for most people, is almost all of it. The Stoic reorientation is not passive. It is not resignation. It is strategic. When you stop spending energy on the uncontrollable, that energy does not disappear. It redirects. It goes into the only place where it can actually produce an outcome, your response, your preparation, your approach, your internal state. And when your internal state is the thing you have mastered, situations that destroy other people become situations you simply walk through. Lesson 2. The pause that produces power. In 161 AD, Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome against his own wishes. He had spent his adult life studying philosophy, preferring books to power. And then, overnight, he was handed the most demanding position in the ancient world, and immediately faced a massive military crisis on the northern frontier. What would have destroyed most leaders was what Marcus Aurelius had spent 20 years training for. He wrote in his private journals, the Meditations, something that modern neuroscience has now confirmed with clinical precision. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This is not a metaphor. It is a neurological reality. When something happens, an insult, a setback, a threat, a provocation, your amygdala fires within 100 milliseconds. Your body prepares for fight or flight before your conscious mind has even registered the event. You feel the surge, the heat, the tightening. And the untrained person, which is most people, immediately acts from that surge. They respond, they react, they speak before they have chosen to speak, and the situation takes them. The Stoics built a practice around the pause. Marcus called it anacresis, the space of reflection before action. Seneca called it the moment of premeditatio, deliberate consideration. Epictetus drilled it into his students as the single most important mental habit they could develop. And here is why it changes everything in a practical, immediate sense. Viktor Frankl, not a Stoic, but a man who proved Stoic philosophy under conditions no philosopher ever faced, survived Nazi concentration camps by discovering the same principle. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about the guards who tortured, the starvation, the absolute removal of all external freedom. and what he found in that absolute deprivation was the one thing that could never be taken, the gap between what happened and what he chose to do with it. He called it the last human freedom. The Stoics would have nodded. Here is the training. It is simple. Difficult, but simple. The next time something hits you, a piece of news, a confrontation, a failure, a betrayal, and you feel the surge rise in your chest, you practice one thing. You name what is happening. Not out loud, internally. This is my amygdala firing. This is my threat response activating. This is my body preparing for danger that my mind has not yet evaluated. That act of naming, clinical, precise, detached, creates the pause. It inserts a microsecond of observation between the event and your reaction, and in that microsecond you reclaim the situation. Because the person who acts from the surge is owned by whoever created it. The person who pauses just long enough to choose owns themselves. And the person who owns themselves controls every room they walk into. Lesson 3. Read the field before you move. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, wrote something that has been largely overlooked in the modern reading of Stoicism. The wise man does nothing he might later regret, nothing against his will, but does everything honorably, consistently, seriously, and rightly. He does not anticipate things as if they were going to happen, but looks forward to them as if they might not happen. This is not a passive observation. It is a description of a specific cognitive practice, the practice of reading situations before entering them, without either optimistic blindness or catastrophizing anxiety. The Stoics called this prosoche, attention to the present moment, to what is actually happening, as opposed to what you fear might happen or hope will happen. It is the discipline of seeing clearly. And seeing clearly is rarer than people realize. Most people do not see situations as they are. They see them filtered through their emotional needs, their desire to be liked, their fear of conflict, their hope that things are better than they appear, their assumption that the other person's motivations resemble their own. General Vo Nguyen Giap, the Vietnamese military strategist who defeated both France and the United States, was once asked what single characteristic separated winning generals from losing ones. His answer was not firepower, not logistics, not numerical advantage. He said, accurate perception of the situation you are actually in, not the situation you wish you were in. This is a Stoic answer. Giap had never read Seneca, but he had arrived at the same principle through lived combat. The reason most people lose control of situations is not lack of strength. It is not lack of intelligence. It is inaccurate perception. Seeing what they want to see, or what they fear to see, instead of what is actually there. Here is how the Stoics trained this. They called it memento mori, not as morbid contemplation, but as a reality anchor. The practice of remembering that this moment is real, that time passes, that what is happening right now is what is actually happening, cuts through the fantasies and defenses we construct around difficult truths. The practical application. Before every significant situation, a difficult conversation, a negotiation, a confrontation, a decision, spend 2 minutes asking 3 questions. What is actually happening here, stripped of what I want to be happening? What do I know about the people involved, not what do I assume? What are the real constraints, not the ones I imagine? That 3-question inventory, practiced consistently, builds what the Stoics called phronesis, practical wisdom, the ability to perceive reality accurately and respond accordingly, not the ability to control outcomes, the ability to engage with what is real rather than shadowboxing with your own projections. The person who sees the room as it actually is always has an advantage over the person who sees the room as they wish it were. Lesson 4. Make your emotions informative, not operative. Here is the most common misunderstanding of Stoicism, and it is worth confronting directly because it has led millions of people to misapply this philosophy in ways that actually damage them. Stoicism is not about eliminating emotions. The Stoics did not teach emotional suppression. They did not advise becoming a stone. Marcus Aurelius grieved deeply when his children died. He lost several. Seneca wept when his closest friend passed. Epictetus felt fury at injustice. These were not failures of Stoic practice. They were proof that Stoicism was built for human beings, not machines. What the Stoics taught was a specific relationship with emotion, not elimination, transformation, from emotion as operator to emotion as informant. This distinction is everything. When emotion is operative, it runs you. Your anger makes your decisions. Your fear sets your boundaries. Your desire determines your direction. You are not choosing your responses. Your emotional state is choosing them for you. And the person in the room who understands that your anger is making your decisions has just found your lever. When emotion is informative, it serves you. Your anger tells you that something important has been violated, and then you decide what to do about it. Your fear tells you that something significant is at risk, and then you decide how to respond. Your grief tells you that something mattered deeply, and you honor that without being disabled by it. James Stockdale, U.S. Navy Vice Admiral, prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7.5 years, tortured repeatedly, denied communication with family, held in isolation, survived because of Stoicism. He had read Epictetus before being shot down. In captivity, he applied every principle he had studied, not to suppress his suffering, to prevent his suffering from making his decisions. He later wrote, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which, in retrospect, I would not trade." He called this the Stockdale paradox. Hold the brutal reality of your present situation with complete clarity. Simultaneously, hold complete faith in your eventual capacity to prevail. Never confuse the two. This is the Stoic emotional framework in its most battle-tested form. For you, in your life, in your situations, the next time a strong emotion rises, and they should, do not push it down. Do not perform calm you do not feel. Instead, pause. Lesson 2. Name the emotion with clinical precision, and then ask, what is this emotion telling me about what I value, what is at stake, or what is being violated? Extract the information. Then choose your response from clarity, not from the feeling itself. The person who can do this in high-pressure situations, who can feel the pressure fully without being driven by it, is operating at a level most people never reach. Lesson 5. Why comfort is the enemy of control. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He owned multiple estates, employed hundreds, lived with access to luxury that most people in his era could not imagine, and he voluntarily, regularly, stripped himself of all of it. He would spend days eating only the food of the poor, sleeping on hard ground, wearing rough cloth, walking in winter cold without protection, not because he was forced to, because he had built a deliberate practice of discomfort into his life. He wrote to Lucilius, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This was not masochism. This was calibration. Seneca understood something about human psychology that modern behavioral research has now validated in clinical trials. The anticipation of discomfort is almost always worse than the discomfort itself. The fear of loss is almost always larger than the actual experience of losing. The dread of difficulty shrinks the person before the difficulty ever arrives. By voluntarily entering discomfort regularly, on his own terms, Seneca was doing something precise. He was discovering that he could survive what he feared, that his comfort was not his foundation, that he was not dependent on his circumstances in order to function. And this discovery is what made him psychologically unmanipulable. Think about the leverage that is most commonly used against people. Job loss, social exclusion, financial pressure, loss of comfort, status, approval. These are the tools, and they work almost exclusively on people who have never proven to themselves that they can function without those things. The Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate practice under voluntary difficulty, not random suffering, not self-punishment, controlled exposure to hardship, done with awareness, to build what Epictetus called prohairesis, the faculty of rational choice that operates independently of external circumstances. Frederick Douglass, enslaved, escaped, became one of the most powerful orators and writers in American history, wrote in his autobiography that the moment he stopped fearing the worst they could do to him, the power dynamic shifted. Not because his circumstances changed, because his relationship to those circumstances changed. He had, through sustained confrontation with the worst conditions imaginable, discovered that he could not be broken by what people assumed would break him. The practical application for you is not dramatic. You do not need to sleep on floors or fast for days, though you can. The practice is smaller and more consistent. Deliberately choose the harder option in low-stakes situations. Take the cold shower. Have the uncomfortable conversation you have been postponing. Sit with boredom instead of reaching for stimulation. Go without something you rely on for a defined period. Each small act of voluntary discomfort is a message you send to your own nervous system. The message is, I am not controlled by my comfort. And the person who is not controlled by their comfort cannot be controlled by threats to it. Lesson 6. Speak less than necessary. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, was known among his contemporaries for something unusual in a philosopher: extraordinary brevity. His students recorded that he would sometimes teach for an entire session through a single sentence, followed by silence. When asked why he spoke so little, he reportedly answered, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I intend to use them in proportion. But Zeno's silence was not shyness. It was not insecurity. It was not the silence of someone who had nothing to say. It was the deliberate, practiced withholding of words that had not yet earned their moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. He was a man open to correction, but only from those who had demonstrated enough substance to correct him, not from those who were simply loud. The reason silence is a Stoic power practice is not mystical, it is operational. Every word you speak reveals information. Every explanation you give hands someone else material they can work with. Every defense you offer tells the other person exactly where you feel exposed. And in any situation where the dynamic is not yet settled, where power is being established, where trust has not been confirmed, where the other person's intentions are not yet clear, speaking too much is not communication. It is surrender. Observe what happens in negotiations, in difficult conversations, in confrontational situations, when one person goes quiet and the other person keeps talking. The talker, almost without exception, begins to reveal things they did not plan to reveal. They fill the silence with qualifications, with nervous additions, with slight changes to their position. They explain more than necessary, and in explaining more, they show the shape of their anxiety. The silent person collects, then decides what, if anything, to return. Thomas à Kempis wrote in The Imitation of Christ, a text Marcus Aurelius would have recognized philosophically, Rest from inordinate desire of knowledge, for therein is found much distraction and deceit. The Stoics would apply this to speech. Rest from the inordinate desire to be understood immediately, to fill every silence, to explain yourself before the other person has formed a judgment. That urgency is a form of fear, and fear shown too early, handed to the wrong person, becomes a tool they use against you. The discipline. The next time you are in a high-stakes conversation and you feel the impulse to speak, to explain, to justify, to smooth over the silence, pause instead. Let the silence exist. Not aggressively, not with visible discomfort. Just let it be. Watch what the other person does with it, and decide from what they reveal whether what you were going to say actually needed to be said. Most of the time it did not. Lesson 7. Reframe or be framed. Marcus Aurelius was dying slowly. He had been ill for years, managing a failing body while managing an empire. His son Commodus, whom history would record as one of Rome's worst emperors, was already showing signs of the character that would eventually undo his father's legacy. And Marcus, knowing this, wrote nothing in his journals that resembled self-pity. What he wrote were reframes, active, deliberate reconstructions of how he chose to see what was happening. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not positive thinking, it is not denial, it is not the kind of facile optimism that tells people to look on the bright side while their life burns. It is a cognitive practice, a deliberate, active restructuring of the meaning assigned to events. The Stoics called this cognitive reframing. Viktor Frankl called it finding meaning. Modern cognitive behavioral therapy calls it cognitive restructuring. They are all pointing at the same neurological reality. The brain does not respond to events. It responds to the interpretation of events. And interpretation is, to a degree most people never exercise, a matter of choice. Here is what this looks like in practice, not in philosophy books, but in actual situations. When Epictetus was asked how to handle being insulted publicly, he did not say ignore it or suppress the pain. He said, if someone succeeded in provoking you, realize that your mind was complicit in the provocation. Not victim blaming. Clarity. The insult landed because you assigned it the power to land. Reassign the power and the insult becomes information about the person delivering it rather than a wound. When Nelson Mandela walked out of 27 years of imprisonment and was asked how he could emerge without bitterness, he said that he had made a conscious decision during those years to understand what was happening to him without allowing it to define who he was. He reframed imprisonment not as destruction but as preparation, not as defeat but as an enforced depth-building period that his freedom would eventually make use of. That reframe was not passive, it was not natural. It was constructed deliberately over years as a survival practice. For you, the situations that are currently costing you the most energy, are they costing you that energy because of what is objectively happening, or because of the story you are telling yourself about what is happening? This is not a rhetorical question. Sit with it. Because the moment you identify the story, the specific interpretation that is generating the most suffering, you have located the thing you actually have power over, not the situation. The meaning you have assigned to it, and meaning, unlike circumstance, is yours to adjust. The people who control situations are not the ones with the most power over others. They are the ones with the most power over themselves. Their reactions, their timing, their attention, their values, their response to hardship and loss and pressure and provocation. Marcus Aurelius had it all externally and built it internally. Epictetus had nothing externally and was freer than any emperor. Cato lost everything and kept everything that mattered. Stockdale was broken physically and was never broken in any way that counted. They are not mythological, they are possible, Every principle in this script is something human beings discovered through actual lived experience, which means every principle in this script is available to you. Not someday, now, in the next situation, in the next moment of pressure, in the next conversation where the temperature rises and you feel the pull toward reaction. You have a choice. You have always had a choice. The Stoics just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. Go build the mind that controls every situation.